Have you ever tried playing a board game without any rules? It's chaos. Everyone is doing their own thing and nobody knows what's going on. Well, trying to design without a style guide is pretty much the same concept. If you don't have that style guide to guide your direction of where the design is going, it's going to be chaotic when you're getting feedback from stakeholders and just trying to move through with a consistent design. But no need to worry, because Figma is exactly the tool we need to create these style guides and to calm the chaos of design. And today I'm going to show you exactly how to create a style guide in Figma. Hello, I'm Sabrina and I'm an instructional designer and a bootcamp pro on Devlin's team. I help people on their upskilling journey to become instructional designers. And in my day-to-day, I look at a lot of e-learning projects. And the one thing that can make or break those e-learning projects are the visual design choices. And that always makes me think of this quote that I love by Joe Sperano: "Good design is obvious, great design is transparent." It's obvious when people are making these choices of like, oh, they paired these colors together, they paired these fonts together specifically, but it's other small design choices that really are overlooked by a lot of people, but it makes that experience so much better. And style guides are what do that for us. That's like where we start. Making those little decisions is in the style guide. That gives us the rules to the game. It makes sure everybody from the client, the SME, to the quality assurance team, the developer, make sure everybody is on the same page. We're going to be creating the style guide in Figma. And if you're brand new to Figma, be sure to check out my video, How to Get Started with Figma for Instructional Design. Now, if you're familiar with style guides or you're just learning about them, you may be thinking, why should we use Figma? Well, Figma actually has all of the features that we need. We can create shapes, we can create a color palette by using the eyedropper tool, and there's lots of different ways that we can export the files or the slides within Figma. We can export them as PDFs, PNGs, things like that. Whatever needs we have, we can export it in Figma that way. The other thing is it's really easy to share and gather feedback from stakeholders. You can share the Figma link, the file, and your stakeholders can leave comments directly on the slides, which is great. It's also really easy to organize those slides. You can move them around, get them set up, show the user flow, things like that. And then you can also have lots of different pages. So maybe you want to separate it by all the different versions of the mockups that you create, or you want to separate it by the mood board, the style guide, the wireframes, things like that. You can do that with the options of the pages. And then last but not least, it makes sense to keep everything all in one spot when you're working on a project. Now, as we move into Figma, you may be starting to get familiar with the tool, but knowing how to use the shortcuts in Figma are really going to be a nice little time saver. So to learn those shortcuts, be sure to download the keyboard shortcut that we have linked down in the description below. Okay, we're going to pretend that we've met with our client and we've started going through those beginning ID processes. We've done our needs analysis, we've wrote the learning objectives, we've wrote our storyboard, and now we're ready to start getting into those visuals. We want to create a style guide, wireframes, and high fidelity mockups. In this video, we are just going to focus on that style guide. So, like I said, we are digging in. We've already wrote our storyboard, so here's just some screenshots of what's been written. After meeting with our client, we've decided a scenario-based learning experience is going to be the best option. For some context, our client is a restaurant, and they were having trouble with their kitchen staff responding to chaos in the kitchen. So specifically for this one, a grease fire. So I've done my storyboard. Here's some screenshots just to get an idea. And then I went ahead and created a mood board. So I like to create a mood board for inspiration and just to get an idea of where am I going with things, explore different styles, think about what message am I trying to convey with my visuals, and so I create a mood board. I've decided to go on this what you see here on the left, this style here. I think that fits what I'm going to do really well, and I found some really good characters to convey that message. All of these images here were sourced from FreePic. That's usually where I get the majority of my images. If you would like to know where to find more images, check out Devlin's video, Where to Find Graphics for E-Learning, and we'll link that below so that you can find a lot more resources. Okay, now that we have talked about this beginning piece, we have a storyboard, we have a mood board, we're ready to create the style guide, ready to create those rules to the game. I'm going to go ahead and create a frame by pressing F, and I'm just going to click and make this small little 100 by 100 square, then go over to my left panel and change up the size. I'm changing it to a 16 by 9 ratio, so 1280 by 720 pixels. That's usually the size that I design in Figma or in Storyline, so I like to do the same thing in Figma, especially with the style guide. That way I know what like my fonts and buttons are going to look like on the actual slide, like the actual size that they'll look like. All right, frame 1 is not a descriptive title, so let's double click and let's call it Style Guide. And just to be safe, I'm going to call it version 1 because there may be iterations, and that's okay. But what do we put on this frame? So in a style guide, we want to include some key elements. Of course, colors. We want to generate a color palette. So thinking of like, what do we have in our graphics? What message are we trying to convey? What's going to look nice on our design? I want to talk about the typography. So what fonts are we choosing? Different things like that. The buttons, we want to think about the different styles. Again, what's going to fit the theme. If you're working with a brand that already has a logo but they don't have a style guide, definitely include that logo because you can pull some of the colors from there to help you build out the other pieces. And then some optional things that you can include in a style guide are test text. So if we create all of these really great things and these great learning experiences, we want it to be legible. So you may want to test the text colors to make sure things are working. Spacers, this is going to help you keep things consistent with your spacing. But actually Figma has it built in for us to check the spacing. So we actually don't need to include those for our style guide. And then you could also include like characters or illustrations, or if you're using stock photos, you can include those as well. So these are the main things. We're going to focus on color, typography, and buttons in our style guide. And then, like I said, I'll show you the thing with spacers that we don't need to worry about it because Figma has that taken care of for us. So let's go ahead and let's do T for text. Gonna add that box. And let's do colors. That's very small. So I'm gonna go over here to this left panel. Let's bump it up to 32. That might be too big. We can always go back and change that. And let's see, I'm gonna hold down Alt and the arrow. It gives me these red guidelines, which is why I was saying we don't need spacers because we can see how many pixels away we are from things. So I need to come down 7 and then go 1 over. And I'm just using my arrow keys to do that. All right, we're at 30 and 30. Great. This may end up being too big, and this is not going to be the font that I use, so I'll go back and change this once I talk about fonts. But we really want to treat the style guide as like one of those first design deliverables that we create for feedback, but it's really creating the brand and the whole like feel of the learning experience we're going to create. All right, colors. Well, we don't want to get crazy with color. When we're talking about color, we want to keep it very simple. Especially if you're new to design, you don't want to add a bunch of color. It can get confusing for your learners if they're expecting all of your buttons to be green and then there's a surprise purple button that they're not sure about, but when they click it, it does the same thing as a green button. So we want to keep things very simple. How we do that is we just pick a dark neutral color, typically going to be the color of your font, a light neutral color, usually a background behind that font, and then an accent color. What color do we want to use to draw our learners' attention? We usually use the accent color for the buttons because we want them to click those things. So that's what we're going to focus on. All right, now I'm going to add that in here, and I'm just going to make some squares. So I can come up here and click the rectangle, or use the shortcut and just press R. And then I'm just going to click to make 100 by 100 squares. Like I said, this is our first deliverable, so I want to make sure things are staying nice and neat. I'm going to go with that, 15 pixels away. I may have to go back later and adjust things. Okay, so I know I need 3 boxes for my dark, my light, my accent. So I can press Control C and Control V to copy and paste it like you would in any other things. So I can copy and paste this square. I can press Control D to duplicate it. But one of the things I like to do is hold down Shift and Alt and then drag this rectangle. So it's going to keep things lined up, which is nice. And there we go. Let go. You can do the same thing. Shift Alt and drag. All right, we're going to have our dark, our light, and our accent. I've actually already chosen the colors for this color palette, so I'm going to go through and add those in. Okay, we got those colors all added in. So here, this E8 color was my accent, and now here is my lighter shade and my darker shade. And so it's still giving this like message that I want to convey, that there's a sense of urgency since it's about kitchen fires, without being too harsh. Okay, we have our colors all set. Now we want to talk about the typography, the fonts. Just like the colors, we want to keep this very simple. So it's really tempting to use different fonts for different messages in the e-learning experience, but we really want to focus on consistency. So let's keep it nice and simple. We want a heading. We want a heading 2 or a subheading. So these will be sometimes the same fonts, sometimes different fonts. You never really want to use any more than 2 different types of fonts. Then again, just like the colors, it can get confusing. So more modern design is really only using 1 font, but 2 fonts is totally okay. And then you also want a body text. So let's do that. So I'm going to take this colors thing, Shift Alt, and drag down. And I'm going to change it to typography. Oh. And like I said, I'm going to want a heading, a subheading, and body text. I like to only use fonts that are on Google Fonts, just because I know that I can download the entire font family for free. It makes it really easy to grab those and import them to whatever tool that I'm going to be authoring in. So I like to do that. And then when I'm picking fonts, I want to be very specific that the fonts I'm choosing are easy to read. Again, we don't want to create this like really great learning experience and then it's not legible. So if you're a former teacher or a current teacher, you've probably heard that term teacher fonts, where it's like these fun flowy fonts, which are very beautiful, but sometimes are really hard to read. And we don't want to do that to our learners where they're like struggling to read this and then the information isn't sticky. So typically what we do is stick to a sans serif font. So if you think of Times New Roman, how it has like those little edges and like a little bit fancier pieces on the letter, and that is a serif font. We want to do sans serif, so without those like fancy pieces. So this font you see here is Inter, and it doesn't have any fancy stuff. I think it's okay though for your heading or like that title that you write to be a display font or a serif font, as long as it's still legible. You can still use that to kind of convey some emotion, but then your body text or those subheadings, the one that's going to be visible most often, you probably want it to be a sans serif font so that it's easy to read. I'm not going to actually use Inter as my font for this learning experience, so I do want to change my style guide to the font I'm using. And I actually am going to go ahead and use a display font for my heading, and then I'm going to stick with a sans serif font for my subheading and my body text. So I'm going to go ahead and add those in and then show you how I've changed things up on the side. Okay, I've chosen this font Krona 1 as my heading 1 because I want it to be my title. So I want it to feel important and bold, while also still being kind of inviting, right? We don't want to scare them off right in the title. So I want it to be like, hey, this is important and it's urgent, but come try it out. So I went with that one. And so how we label it in our style guide is I want to let people know what this is. So this is heading 1. I let them know the font is Krona 1, and you can see that over here in the left panel, and the text is the title. The weight is a regular weight because this one has no other weights, and it is at 64 pixels. So like I said, style guide are the rules to the game. If I create this learning experience for a client and then they decide later down the line that they want to make some changes, they have all the information and they're not trying to search and like match fonts or things like that. Or if they send it back to me, I'm not having to search for fonts and things like that. I have it all in my style guide. Okay, so there's the heading 1. My heading 2, I want to use Montserrat. Montserrat and Poppins are like my two favorite fonts, and they're usually my go-tos because I think they have like this really nice modern feel and are easy to read. So heading 2 is less prominent than heading 1. We don't want it to overshadow, and it still has a little bit more weight to it, just so that it's more visible and it shows like the hierarchy that it is important, but it isn't overpowering the heading 1. And then same idea, it's heading 2, so people know what it is. Montserrat, so they know the font. Semi-bold, they know the weight. 36 pixels, they know the size. And again, I'm doing that here. Yes, you can see it on this left panel, but if I exported this style guide as a PNG to send off, people may not know, and they may not be able to find the fonts because it's not in the Figma file, but they can see it here. All right, body text, I'm going to stick with that Montserrat. So I'm only using 2 fonts. Again, this one is more title, will just be on the title slide, and then Montserrat everywhere else. But my body text is Montserrat in a medium weight at 28 pixels. So again, using that hierarchy, I don't want it to compete with heading 2, so it's a little bit smaller and it's a lighter weight. So it still is prominent. People will be able to read it, but it's not taking attention from those other ones. When you look at this, you can see what the hierarchy is. But now that I've done that, I actually want everything else to be in these fonts. So typography and colors, I'm going to hold down shift and select both. I want these both to match our branding now. So I'm going to do it as headings, heading 2. So Montserrat, we're going to do semi-bold, and let's do 36. Ooh, now it's starting to get a little bit lost in there. So I'm going to click these 3 dots and I'm going to underline them. That kind of pulls it away. You'll also notice that the color is pure black, but I know my dark neutral is that nice little blue right there, or bluish gray. So I'm going to use the eyedropper and pull that color. All right, we're looking good. I'm gonna go back here actually. Colors, Alt, and I did 10 away. There is no space here, so I want to move everything down some. You can use the arrow keys to just move it down 1 pixel at a time, or if you hold down shift while pressing the arrow key, it'll move it 10 pixels at a time, or like multiples of 10. So let's see. And there we go. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe add a little bit more space, but let's see what we're working with first. Okay, we have our colors. And actually, these here are still in pure black, so I can change those. Again, this is all the beginning of the design piece. We're creating this brand. We want to make sure everything feels on brand. And to even be even more specific, I can change the background of this frame to match our light neutral. May not look like a lot changed, but it did. It's not pure white anymore. And that's also why there's an outline on this box, is so that you can see it from the background. Okay, we've done our colors, we've done our typography. Next, we want to talk about buttons. Just like everything we've talked about, we want to keep it simple. There's a few things we want to think about. We want a primary button. So that's usually like your get started or begin buttons and continue buttons. And then you may want a secondary button. So I'm thinking ahead to like the end slide where there may be like a restart and an exit. I want my learners to exit the learning experience, so that'll be my primary action. But if they want to restart it, I want them to have that option, but as a secondary button. So they know like, hey, that's an option, but it's not the primary one right now. Because I'm creating a scenario-based learning experience, I also want to include a mentor button. So I want my learners to be able to have a mentor character that they can go to if they need advice while they're answering a question. If I was creating a job aid, I'd also want a job aid button as well. And then as I'm creating these buttons, I want to include these hover states or even a selected state. I like to include hover states because it helps the learner know like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, my mouse is over this button. If I click, something's going to happen. Just to give them some kind of like some cue that things have changed. Okay, so let's get into that. And I'm just going to go ahead and again, select colors, shift alt, and move this over and change the text to buttons. Okay, so buttons. Like I said, I want a primary, a secondary, and then a mentor button, and then hover states for each of those. So I'm going to show you how I create the primary button, and then I will go through and create the rest of them. So I want a rectangle. So press R and click. When you're designing buttons, you want to think about your learners that are on mobile. And usually you don't want to go anything less than 60 pixels for something like in a touch space, a clickable. I usually like to go a width of 250 and a height of 80. And that's pretty good. If I get into the design process and decide like, oh, that's too big or it doesn't work, I can always change it. Remember, this is all iterative, but we just want like a game plan of like where we're going to start. And then I like the square buttons, but with these illustrations, I think I want to do some rounded corners. So up here at the corner radius, I can change those. So I'm going to do like 15. And I think I like that edge. One thing I will say is I always love pill buttons. And to create a pill button, you can just create a rectangle and then change this corner radius to 100. And then you get that nice pill button shape. Those are always my go-to buttons, but I'm trying to be adventurous and just go with a rounded corner. So there is that. And now, like I said, our accent color is usually what we choose for our button. So I'm going to change it to that color. And I'm going to go with the like in the center. And I know that when I create a prompt box, I like to have some outline. So I think I'm going to add that here as well. I'm going to do a dark neutral. And let's bump that up to a 3. I like the way that feels. And now my text. So you can click up here or press T. And this is going to be a primary button. I'll press escape so that I can alter this. And I'm going to go with similar to the body text. So Montserrat medium. It's size 28, but I think I'm going to go just a bit smaller in my buttons with 24. And then I do want that to be the dark neutral color. All right, I'm going to hold Shift and select the rectangle. Go up here and get things nice and centered. All right, that's going to be my primary button. So now I'm going to go through and create the hover state for this, create the secondary button, and create my mentor buttons. Okay, I've created all of my buttons now. So here's my primary. Here's the primary hover. You'll see that this is white text. I'm going to get to that in just a second. Here is the secondary button. This button here is called a ghost button. So it has an outline, but the fill is the same as the background. That's typically the go-to for a secondary button is a ghost button. Sometimes that doesn't work with the design, but I'm going to plan for a ghost button, and if I need to change it, I will. And then the hover state, of course, is like when the mouse hovers over it, it's going to change to that color. For the secondary hover, I wanted to have a little bit more color, so I went with the lighter version of our accent without being drawing too much attention from the primary, and then here the hover is darker. For my mentor button, I kind of went a different direction. So you can see my character here, and it's using that dark neutral and then our accent color as the outline. So instead of the color of the button changing for the hover, his expression is going to change. And when you're on a job, sometimes when you're new, it's like scary to ask for help, right? So I don't want that to be the case in my learning experience. I want this guy to be very friendly and excited to help. So when people hover, he's going to be like excited and can't wait to help them. All right, so here is our style guide. And now usually what I would do is go through, like I can see there's some spacing here. So maybe I'll take this whole thing, shift and press down. Kind of give it a little more breathing room. That looks pretty good. These are okay. Maybe I'd fix up the spacing here a little bit more. Maybe even actually, let's move this over a bit. And now you can kind of see we have this brand. If I didn't have my character in the mentor button already, I would definitely add characters from what I chose in my mood board to show them here. They can even fit right here probably. If I had a logo, I could throw that on here, but really this is the main piece. And I did say that there are optional things. So test text. Over here, my text changed from the dark neutral to the light neutral because when I tested this color, this darker bluish gray on this more orangey background, it was not passing the contrast checker ratio. It passed enough, but to be safe, I went ahead and went with this white color. I may still change it back. We'll see. I'm not too sure, but I'll show you real quick how I did that. So the tool that I like to use is called WebAIM. and they have a contrast checker. And it's really nice because you just put in your hex code for the foreground and then your hex code for the background, and it's going to tell you whether or not it passes. And then if you're like, well, what does it mean by large text? Down here gives you all of those directions. So when I checked my text here, it passed everything up to here, but it did not pass in the normal text, which I think is fine. I could have left it, since this is in a medium font, it has a heavier weight. It would be okay as the darker color, but for now I'm going to leave it that white, and then we'll see. Maybe I change it back to the dark. I don't know yet. I want to see how it plays with everything else. All right, so here is all of our style guide. One thing I highly recommend is going through, so these are all separate elements. I would group them and then name it like dark neutral, light neutral, things like that. Another thing that we can do here is if I click this dark color and there's a plus sign up here, I can add, oh, no, that's not what I meant to do. I can add a color. This style right here is what I meant to click. We can click it and we can add. And this color we are going to call our dark neutral. And if you want, you can say this is for fonts and create a style. So what's going to happen is when we're like outside of it, you're going to see your color styles. You can set font styles doing the exact same thing. So if I select this one, same thing, go to style, add. This could be body text. And what it's for is for the body text, but I can create the style there. So now when I look, I have my text styles. And what's nice is then if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to change this because it's not in the correct style, I can go here to my styles. There's body text, and it will change it to what I need it to be. But I'm going to leave it there for now. I should go in and change these to Montserrat to be the right size so that everything is fitting with our brand. But yeah, that's what you want to do, is like make sure everything is on brand with styles and all of that. So there is our style guide. Okay, that was went a little bit off track. That was a test font, the test text. The other thing was the spacers. So before I got a little off track and excited about our style guide, we can add spacers. So like I did here, these squares. And what you would do is like here in the buttons, maybe I want to make sure that there's always like 20 pixels on top of my text, 20 pixels on bottom of the text in my button. And I can create little rectangles to go through and like measure and make sure that that works. But we don't need it because Figma, like I said, allows us to measure. So if I press Alt and then move my arrow over, it's going to tell me how far away things are. So even if I click on my text, press Alt, I can see it's 26 on top, 25, 38, 37, and that's probably just because of how long this text is. It's not exactly centered, although we did say to center it. Same thing here. When I was checking to make sure everything was like nice and balanced, can hold down Alt and move your arrow key to see those measurements. So we don't need spacers for that. And then, like I said, if I had not added my mentor character to these mentor buttons, I would definitely add some illustrations here of what I plan to use. Definitely still have room. I can rearrange these things to get those on there as well. But these are the main pieces for our style guide. These are the rules. One thing that I do want to remind of is that a style guide, again, is a living, breathing document. You may send it off to a stakeholder and they may say, you know, this color is really not giving the sense of urgency that we want people to feel when there's a grease fire. Can we go with something a little bit more intense? And that's okay. The style guide, again, it's going to be the rules to the game. We start somewhere, and then we may have to make iterations as we go. So maybe it's not exactly the rules to a game, but maybe like the house rules, right? If you think about Uno, I think every family plays the Uno card game a little bit different. Everyone has their own spin. That's kind of like the style guide. You have this general census of where you're going, and then or general consensus of where you're going. But if you need to make iterations, you totally can. If you decide your buttons, when they get to the design phases of like the high fidelity mockups, it doesn't really fit, you can change it, but always come back and update your style guide. All right. So what's important to know, though, is style guides give us the general idea, the general direction, the general idea of where we're going with our design. It helps us be professional in our design, it keeps our consistency, and it gives clarity to everybody involved, from the client, the SME, the quality assurance team, and the developer. Make sure everybody knows what's going on. Again, if you make changes later down the line, don't forget to go back and update your style guide in those visual mock-ups if you make any changes throughout. So that brings us to what's coming up next. In the next video, we're going to talk about creating wireframes. So we're going to start building out what's happening in this storyboard. Wireframes are going to be really helpful. Just like here we were talking about keeping things simple, that's what wireframes are going to do. So we'll build some of those together, and then we'll keep going from there in the design process. So if you want to make sure you're notified when that video comes out, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you there. Bye.